So, hello, welcome back. I hope you're all fueled with full bellies and welcome for the next part of today's event. And it's now my turn in the moderating chair. So in the second half of the event, we're moving away a bit from the political to the practical, as I told you in my introduction. And in this first session, we're going to hear from the Food Trails cross-cutting managers about their work and their role in the project, including, for whoever is wondering, what a cross-cutting manager is, what this means for the project, and also the role of the Food 2030 framework in supporting innovation of food actions at the urban level. So I'm going to take a seat over here, and I'm going to welcome to the stage we have with us today Alice Casiraghi, who is the Circularity Food Trails cross-cutting manager. And we also have with us today Shaleen Meelu, who is the Nutrition Food Trails cross-cutting manager. So welcome both of you. I'm a bit far away. I'm going to shuffle in.
Thank you.
Would you like to take the microphone? Oh, you've got one. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Too many microphones, not enough hands. Here, let me take this. There we go. Playing some.
The sound of my own voice.
Playing some musical chairs here. That's fine. Okay. So let me start with Alice. Let me start over here. So to kick us off, can you set the scene a little bit for us here? What exactly is a cross-cutting manager, and what does that mean in the context of the Food Trails project?
Thank you. So the cross-cutting managers are 4 professionals that have been working with 11 cities of food trails. Each of us represent one of the 4 pillars of the Food 2030 strategy of the European Union. You can see us here. We had more than one person representing the same pillar in different parts of the project. So our role is to go and visit the cities. Each city chooses what is their benefit, their priority within the Food 2030 framework, and their co-priorities. Usually they choose 2. But then we go and visit all the cities, each of us goes, so not just the cross-cutting managers that represent the pillar that the city has chosen, all of us, we go and help keep the cities accountable in the Food 2030 framework. So even if a city chose to work on communities, I would go as the representative for Circularity and ask them to meet the stakeholders, ask them questions, because the idea underlying Food Trails is that the cities have priorities to work on, but we should always keep track of the other priorities because it's a holistic work that they want to carry on with their food policies.
So you moved around a lot, and it means you've got a really interesting bird's eye view of the whole overview of the event. Of the project, sorry. I will come back a little bit on some of the details there, but Shaleen, let me come to you first. I mean, these cross-cutting managers, they're quite an innovative element, I suppose, of this project. Why exactly do you think that this cross-cutting component was so important, and why was it so instrumental to the success of the Food Trails project?
Well, to start off with, many of the cities are being asked to do something they've never done before, and they're being asked to do it within this Food 2030 framework. So the 4 pillars, Alice just described quite effectively. We were also, the cities might remember, the CLIck framework that we were all introduced to by some of the academics leading this project. So CLIck is a systems concept. So we want to have connectivity between these 4 areas. We want to make linkages. We want our way of engaging communities to be innovative. And we want to be able to establish connections, because we're not looking at making 1 or 2 or 3 changes based on our personal areas of interest. So some of us might be interested in food waste. Some of us might be interested in school food. But to understand that each of these initiatives plays a very important part in a bigger system. So for us, we were there to recognize the role of each other, but also to explain that to the cities.
Okay, excellent, thank you. And I want to come back to this, that it's involved a lot of moving parts and coordinating, and you said that you visited all of the 11 partner cities. So can you talk a little bit about how you kind of coordinated? Okay, some nice visual. Yeah, how you coordinated your trips with these cities, and how did you go about that, working between all 11 cities?
Yes, so the cities have been asked to choose one of the co-benefit they want to focus on at the beginning, and the second priority that they want to focus on. And then the cross-cutting managers gathered and they organized a schedule to go and visit the cities. We did 2 rounds of visits. Sometimes 2 cross-cutting managers would go together. Sometimes we would go alone or 3 of us together, depending on the busy schedule of the cities and depending on our schedules as well. And we would coordinate with the city beforehand because we want to meet the local stakeholders. We want to visit the city, not just the city officers, but see the work that they're doing on ground. And it's been super interesting experience to go and see the different pilots of the cities talking with the stakeholders, with the local food councils. And so between one round, the first round and the second one, in January 2023, we have done an online workshop with all the cities, trying to reassess what was working, what was not working, what could have been improved, to then organize the second round of visits. And so that's what's going on for the past 4 years.
Okay. And talking about coordination, Shaleen, you of course also went and visited all the 11 cities as part of your role here. And you were working between local administration as well as the other various stakeholders. Can you talk a little bit about how you interacted with the local administrations and also how you kind of coordinated between all of these different stakeholders?
Yeah, sure. So on the slides, it's a great example of how we actually worked when we went to the city. So there was a pre-meeting where we discussed what 1, 2, or in some cases it was a little bit over 2 days, interactive workshop would look like. And so Groningen's featured here, partly because Renske does amazing photographs. Is she still here? She's over there. I still have all of her incredible photographs. And so I would present, as say, for example, on nutrition, as the other CCMs did on their various topics. And I'd go back to basics, actually. You know, all of a sudden, you have people who are not trained in food systems who are expected to suddenly be able to give a public health nutrition outlook for their city. So and they may not be based in a public health department. They may not have access to those resources. So the presentation was basically, what is good nutrition? And how do you get data about your populations and all of this kind of stuff, which is, you can see in the first slide on the left, in the big bubble, that was me and Groningen talking to the group. But what we didn't want to do was a lecture. So we would have an interactive discussion. And actually there's the Warsaw suddenly, I think maybe because I just saw Warsaw. Where are they? Oh, there you are. Natalia in the bathroom. But when we met, Natalia introduced us to some academics that she's working with. And we had an interactive conversation where I discovered that actually he does have access to data that could potentially be useful for Warsaw. So it was that style of delivering the workshop. It wasn't me saying this is, you need to have 5 a day, or this is what we want your populations to eat like, or this is what sugar, fat, and salt is. So, and then we also went to the living labs. And again, Groningen has this incredible, I highly recommend it for all food system researchers to visit, where they have a real life living lab. And so those were kids on some land. That's bread in Copenhagen that's being baked for the schools with a starter. If anyone knows how you make sourdough, the starter's been around for years. I can't remember however long. And then the final picture's all of us. So Yale, Bettina, and myself presenting together, which made it easier for us to make linkages between our areas too. So that's what a typical visit would be like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds great. I wish I could come along and see all these projects. No, it's a really nice illustration there of what you're talking about. I mean, Alice, can I come to you maybe on the same question? Is there anything that you would add from your perspective? And also, from your experience visiting all these cities from the circularity perspective, what really stood out to you in terms of their approaches? Any specific anecdotes you can share with us?
Yes, sure. We have a GIF. I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but it's working, and so you'll be distracted. But that's a GIF of of this food council on circularity that was organized in Thessaloniki when I went to visit. And you see in the picture above, we went to this beautiful place called Kiklos, which means circle in Greek, and we sat, all of us together, and we discussed what were the wastes coming from the hotels, the farmers, the markets, and then we discussed what can be done with it, what were the requests of the stakeholders. So I thought that was a very beautiful moment among all my visits to get to interact with all these stakeholders in the whole food systems. We had representatives from the regional waste management policymakers. Then we had representatives from HoReCa business, so hotels and restaurants and catering. And all of them, they wanted to work towards a more circular food system. And so it was beautiful to, as a designer, I'm trained as a designer, so I'm used to do this kind of research to cluster the needs, understand what is needed at different stages of the value chain. But then we have other examples. The second one is the city I come from, so it's Milan. We have been working with the schools to measure the waste from in the school canteens, and we measure the waste before and after the school canteens have been refurbished. So we see the differences in the attention of kids, in the likelihood of them finishing their meals in a different environment. So we try to understand the behavioral nudges, how they act on kids' behavior. And then really segmenting the problem in smaller problems so that we know what we can improve. And the last example is Warsaw. I will have to mention Warsaw as well. In Warsaw, we went to visit the shelters, trying to understand from the local stakeholders what were their needs in terms of if you get the food surplus from the supermarket, from the businesses, how would you use it, and what are the problems with the surplus that comes to you? What are the impediments for you to utilize it, or what makes you produce waste, or what makes the supermarket or the restaurants have food surplus, and what defines their willingness to donate or not. So those are very pragmatic questions that translate the work that has been done at policy level to the ground. And so you work with the people that face these problems every day. And so it's been very rich to work with different cities, working on different pilots, on their living labs, because circularity is a very broad topic, I would say, as nutrition, as all the other Food 2030 topic. And you can address it in many different ways, depending on what is your jurisdiction, what is your priority in the food system. So we had the beautiful chance to see 11 different issues and how they're addressed, and the work that the local stakeholders are doing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing your stories. And I think it really nicely illustrates exactly what your role was here and how it helped with the success of the project. Shaleen, let me come to you now. I want to talk specifically about this Food 2030 agenda. And I'm wondering, we're sat here in Brussels. My question is how you think that the EU can help expand on this and support cities in the Food 2030 agenda. What would you say to that?
Okay, so I'm going to share an anecdote because I did share it with some people yesterday, but it surprised me and I almost felt like it was planted for me and for this talk. But I left London on a Eurostar train, and as I was walking through the carriage, I noticed somebody working hard on a presentation, and it was a presentation to show the benefits of sugar for health. And so we've all been told that Brussels is full of food industry lobbyists. And it amazes me that the efforts that people are going to really shape the narrative and the potential for us. There was another conversation. There was let's just call them a citizen because we like this word, citizen. Two young women, one was a doctor, one was a citizen in this context, who once she discovered she was a doctor was sharing all of her health problems. And she was insisting that she was suffering from a range of micronutrient deficiencies, and this is what she was doing in order to address her problems. And the doctor was very patient. And it takes 2 hours to get from London to Brussels, and that was a full 2-hour consultation. If it was me, I'd be invoicing her. But what was really striking is there you have the food industry, let's just say, doing what it needs to do in order to push its agenda. And then on the other side, you have a member of the public who is thinking, how am I going to sort out my life through food? And you can see that the public needs support, whether it's from health professionals who incidentally aren't trained in nutrition, and this is what we'll come back to the question in a minute. They are not trained in nutrition. Doctors do not have, even though diet-related disease is the major affliction for European citizens, doctors do not have nutrition training. And now we're embarking on this food system transformation, which requires nutrition from production to consumption to be embedded at every stage. And we're expecting, my colleagues who have Abdul's one of my colleagues who's involved in this project, who has no experience to suddenly deliver on a food system transformation agenda. So the two things that the EU, if they want to go down this route and make healthier, sustainable food systems, needs to do is embed technical specialists in these 4 areas in all of the cities that are somehow more advanced now in developing food policy. And for those that are getting started, they need access to that resource, because we know that local governments aren't suddenly going to start recruiting food system expertise in that way. We also need to strengthen links with the academics that are now experts in this area, and for that to be readily available resource. And so this innovative approach is what we need scaled up and embedded and almost like easy access. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Excellent.
I want to actually add on.
Yeah, I was going to come to you and see if you had anything to add. So that was nicely timed.
No, because exactly what you said. You expect nutrition to be embedded in every choice, but also circularity. From my point of view, I think it's fortunate that I'm a designer and then I went into circularity, but I think it's not so fortunate because we're used to do a lot of research, a lot of investigation, and most of the times when you have to deliver on like a food strategy, you just have to go for the problems and implement changes. But you need to have that part at the beginning, that it's about creativity, that it's about exploration, and it's about doing the research. So we've seen cities working with the universities and trying to map what are the issues in the food system. I would say that circularity is even a bigger problem because you have laws that go completely against it. You have hygiene laws in the food systems that say you cannot recollect this food waste in the same truck that delivers the food because that's not sanitary, that's not healthy. But then at the same time, how do you recollect it if you need to invest so much money to do things differently? So you have laws that have been created for a linear world that are impeding innovation in circularity. And so because of this, you need these experts to even just to be there to just do this workshop and ask some questions that you wouldn't have to ask yourself if you're doing your daily job. So you need somebody that comes in and brings the provocative questions. And I think that that's the beauty of this role, that we didn't design for ourselves, but we realized that it was very important while we were doing our trips and our investigations.
Yeah, the importance of provocative questions, I absolutely agree. So obviously as a journalist, that's absolutely right. I also know, so let me come back to, so I know that as part of your work, both of you, you've put together this draft report. Do you want to talk a little bit about that briefly?
Yes.
Shaleen, maybe first. I come to you, Alice, as well on this.
Sure. Obviously we've had massive amounts of experience. I don't know if you all get given 200-page documents to review, but what we didn't want was to produce a 200-page document.
Brussels is actually a specialty on 200-page documents. That's what it does best.
So one of the things unfortunately, about food systems work is just like the Sugar Bureau is doing, is trying to present its view of the food system. We have to constantly remind people why good nutrition is important, what it does for society, or why circularity is absolutely key right now, or why tackling climate issues, and why procurement. And then also, obviously, the most important thing is the innovation around engaging citizens. We can say and do whatever we want, but we can't do that without citizens wanting it too. So what we did at the beginning of the report is make the case for each of those 4 areas. So even though it is the framework, we made the case for it. And then there were some common things for us, the common lessons that we learned by visiting all of the cities. So for me, a classic example is that not everyone's familiar with food-based dietary guidelines. So governments are producing food-based dietary guidelines. Cities know that they're trying to support their kids eating healthily, but so many people don't even know they exist. And then now there's the planetary health diet. What does that mean and how does that relate to it? So the lessons learned, top 3 for each of us, we documented. And then we also looked at some of the challenges. And then do you want to go over the final?
The report here. So I think most of you have taken the reports upstairs or here outside. You have key takeaways. We have in this report we have a brief summary of what we have done across food trails and the recommendations from each of us. Also, another important thing that I think we have done at the end of the document is to align our recommendations under the 4 pillars with the indicators of the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact. So you're familiar with the pact and its indicators, and we try to match those with the Food 2030 pillars or co-benefits. And also, I think you can find it in the link, but no, sorry, wrong clicker. We also have written articles, so if you want to dive deeper in each of the co-benefits, we have written articles. They are on the Food Trails website. But for everything else, there's a report, there's the link tree. you know
if you don't like reading, there's also podcasts.
Yes, listen to the podcast, yeah. I think actually all of your QR codes on your badges, if I'm not mistaken, they link to these reports that you're talking about. So do have a look and do listen to the podcast. Okay, so I'll bring this session to a close. So thank you so much, both Alice and Shaleen. Maybe a round of applause for our panel here.